Nick Wright, co-host First Things First, now joining us live. Oh, okay, let's start with that. Anything?
I like that.
What? You liked it?
That was good. I liked it. I liked all of it. I thought it got one tweak. I would flip-flop Buffalo and Dallas. I think Dallas is right there with Philadelphia, and I think Buffalo takes a step back. Leslie Frazier gone.
True.
The offseason drama.
True.
Josh Allen, more time removed from Brian Daboll. But where your herd hierarchy is spot on is that the Jacksonville Jaguars are for real. The Jacksonville Jaguars, year 2 under Doug Peterson, year 3 for Trevor Lawrence, adding Calvin Ridley, first-round picks, top 10 picks galore on defense in the worst division in football with a soft schedule. I obviously don't think Jacksonville's better than Kansas City, but you said something that I hadn't heard anyone say, but I've been flirting with, which is the Jags are absolutely a threat for the 1 seed.
Yeah.
They could be 13-4 and not the best team in the league, but have the best record.
Yep.
So I like this a lot. I think the Cowboys. I think we talk so much about the Cowboys that I think they are constantly either overrated or underrated. And I think at this point, Colin, they might be a touch underrated. This is a team last year that went 12-5. The losses were week 1 of the season against the Eagles with their backup quarterback, overtime to Aaron Rodgers, overtime to Trevor Lawrence, and a meaningless Week 18 game. They rolled Tampa in the first round of the playoffs, and then they lost a 1-score game to a San Francisco team that had won 11 in a row by an average of 17 points. They did all of that last year despite the fact that their quarterback missed 5 weeks. I think Dallas could be really, really good. And the Chiefs are at this point the 90s Bulls. They've kind of ruined all these lists. Like, we know who's going to be at the top. We know who the favorite is.
Right.
Hey, there's not really a lot of suspense there. But I think that's a really good herd hierarchy. Really good. I wish I could poke holes in it. I thought it was great.
So I want to ask you, we went back this morning, 30 first-round quarterbacks in the last decade. There's 6 stars. We know who they are. Mahomes, Burrow, Lamar, Josh, Trevor Lawrence, Herbert. And then there's 4 guys that I consider high-end starters. I have my misgivings about Tua, but there is some Breeze similarities, Deshaun Watson, Goff, Kyler. And then there's 20 guys who aren't making a Super Bowl. So we have 3 new guys this year, Anthony Richardson, C.J. Stroud, and Bryce Young. Who are you most interested to watch?
Anthony Richardson, by far. Listen, of your list, the only one I would take issue with was Kyler. In that Kyler, I don't believe in as even a medium-end NFL starter, and I also think there is a minimum threshold for size for that position.
Yeah.
He doesn't reach it. That's my concern with Bryce. Bryce checks every box except for the size one, and I think it might be too big of a hurdle, no pun intended, for him to overcome. I think CJ will be fine. I don't know that you watch more college football than me, but I obviously watch Ohio State. I didn't watch him and think he was a future superstar. I think he's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Anthony Richardson is the most interesting.
Yeah.
Because just like in the NBA right now, if you're in the Western Conference, you've got to build your team out thinking, okay, if everything goes perfectly and we have to face the Nuggets, how can we deal with Jokic? If you're in the AFC, you have to build out your team and say, okay, if we make the tournament, how are we going to win 3 straight playoff games against great quarterbacks?
Right.
Where it goes from Justin Herbert in round 1 to Trevor Lawrence or Josh Allen or Joe Burrow, one of them in round 2, just to get the privilege of going to the Arrowhead Invitational to play Patrick Mahomes. And I think Anthony Richardson has that upside. I also think that if folks are dying for the can't-miss franchise quarterback to come into the league, Colin, just wait another year. Because your guy at USC, who I am stealing from you, he will become my guy, Caleb Williams. You got Tom Brady on your show. I got Caleb on our show at the Super Bowl. To me, I look at Joe Burrow and I say, oh, there are legitimate Tom Brady similarities. I'm not saying he's going to be Tom, but stylistically you can see it. Leadership, size, arm strength, clutch, all that. I look at Trevor and I say, oh, there are real Peyton Manning similarities. I'm not saying he's going to be Peyton, but the size, all of it. I look at Josh Allen and I say it's kind of like a Dante Culpepper pre-injury Big Ben hybrid similarities.
Yeah.
Caleb, like that, if people forget how good Dante was before his knee got hurt. He was awesome, and some of the Big Ben stuff as well. Caleb is the first quarterback I have watched, and again, it hasn't been that long, that I'm like, oh, he has some Patrick Mahomes similarities. The size, the style, the creativity, all of it. And I think Caleb is going to be a superstar, which is why, oddly, of all the teams that aren't contenders, the team that should be most excited, I think, is Arizona. Because Arizona is going to be awful. They have their pick. They also smartly now have Houston's pick.
Yeah.
And they could have the number 1 pick of the draft for Caleb, the number 4 pick of the draft to use on Marvin Harrison Jr., and then trade Kyler for another first-round pick, and all of a sudden reload entirely.
Yeah. So I said this earlier. We criticize the Cowboys and the Packers for not winning late in seasons, and then there's the Steelers. And I said the reason we don't criticize them is because, we look at Favre and Rodgers, and we're like, no owner, and they're kind of conservative, and it's like, we get it. And then we look at Dallas and the vanity and the ego and Jerry, and we get it. But when you look at the Steelers, we like everything. We like the coach, the owner. They draft well. They develop well. Their defense, their culture. They literally have an abundance of everything except big wins over the last 12 years. They don't win big games. But whereas we kind of snicker at the Cowboys because of their ego and roll our eyes at the Packers because of their Midwest Dockers-wearing conservatism, we look at the Steelers and we give them a pass. They don't win big games anymore. What do you make of them?
Well, so the 12, I wasn't thinking a 12-year sample because they've obviously, played in that time frame. They've played in an AFC title game, I believe. But what certainly they haven't won a playoff game in like a half decade. I think the last, they made the playoffs with Big Ben and the Chiefs rolled them. They made the playoffs with Big Ben again and the Browns rolled them. We remember the Jags, near the end in the divisional round, hanging 40 on them. Oh, yeah, and of course, the Tebow game a long time ago. My take on the Steelers and the Patriots and the Chiefs, who might have the 3 best coaches in the sport, are very similar. I do not think Mike Tomlin or Bill Belichick over the last 5 years have gotten way worse. And I don't think Andy Reid, and I love him, over the last 5 years has gotten way better. I think the difference is who their quarterback's been. And I think Bill Belichick, all of a sudden, he's a 500 coach, and I think he's overachieving given who their quarterback has been. And Mike Tomlin is just above 500, occasionally sneaks into the playoffs, and I think he's overachieving given you had old Big Ben and then now, Kenny Pickett, and they're trying that out. I don't think they've gotten worse. And Andy Reid, I don't think has all of a sudden gone from a really good coach to one of the best ever. The difference is he went from Alex Smith to Patrick Mahomes and from Donovan McNabb to Patrick Mahomes. I think that the Steelers are right now, over the last half decade, living the life of, you can't really compete at the highest level if you don't have that guy at the quarterback spot.
Yeah.
And when they did have Big Ben, I mean, he's a Hall of Famer, I think, and he's a great player, but he also was, if such a thing exists, like a lower tier amongst the Hall of Fame quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I know that sounds rude, but when you're fighting with Manning and Brady in the same conference, there's going to be a guy that gets a lot of bronze medals. It's better than Phillip Rivers, who got a lot of 4th places.
Yeah.
But that's where you're going to end up a lot of the time.
Yeah. So I did a Hall of Fame list, and I've said before, is that if you're going to have an exclusive club, you have to keep it exclusive. The first time you go back and give somebody into the Baseball Hall of Fame because of his accumulation of stats, it doesn't feel the same. And I said there's 10 players currently in the NFL that you can't even argue. They have been the best player at their position, arguably, for a decade.
Yep.
Mahomes, Rodgers, Kelsey, Trent, Jason Kelsey. It's amazing, brothers. would be Hall of Famers. Aaron Donald, Myles Garrett, Von Miller, Bobby Wagner, 9 Pro Bowls, and Justin Tucker doesn't have any of the problems kickers do. And those are just like no doubt. Am I missing somebody here?
So, all right, so there's a few. So I've learned from you, and by learned from you, I mean I learned to just steal things from you and then do them on my own. So I did the exact same thing on my podcast today, What's Right with Nick Wright. So the only guy that you had as a no-doubter that I actually don't think is a no-doubter yet is Myles Garrett. I think everyone else on this list, if they quit today, is in. Myles Garrett, I believe, is almost assuredly going to be a Hall of Famer. But because he's only been doing it for 6 years, I don't think he's a no-doubter yet. There is one guy who you left off the no-doubters who I think is there right now, and I want to get your take on it. And that's Tyreek Hill. If Tyreek Hill quits, is he a Hall of Famer? I think so. I think he is. I think Julio is a Hall of Famer already if he quits. And then there's one guy, because I saw your other list of good starter. I forget what you called it. You didn't mention Jalen Ramsey.
It's
and it got me thinking. I was like, you know what? I think Colin's right. Like Jalen Ramsey, I think is right now a cut below. And you would think he might get there. But given the fact that he might miss this entire year, I'm not sure about it.
Yeah.
So we had a very, I could pull up the list that I had, but it was, you and I were in lockstep on a lot of these. I'm going to say one other name, a guy who just signed an extension, who's going to be, his raw numbers are going to look crazy. Cam Jordan for the Saints has more career sacks than J.J. Watt.
Yeah.
And he's still playing. And so, you know what I mean? You might look at it, he might retire with 130 sacks, and you're going to be like, well, I guess he's got to be in. And so there's that. But a guy like Ndamukong Suh, I think, is just going to miss out.
Yep.
There's a few guys. Patrick Peterson, who is still playing. I think Patrick Peterson is a Hall of Famer, but it's close. And so, but I thought your list was mostly spot on.
Yeah, Julio, now I should know this. Julio is still active. Now, I know, is he still,
He's not
is
on
he
a
still,
team.
He doesn't have a team?
No.
Okay, so Julio Jones.
He hasn't retired.
That's what
go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's my takeaway is I didn't know if Julio, I was talking guys currently playing. I don't know if Julio's in the league. If Julio plays this year, he's absolutely on that list. He's a no-doubter.
Yeah, that's what I figured. I figured he was. It's tough for wide receivers, though, man. Andre Johnson, this is what is frustrating to me about the NFL Hall of Fame. Everybody, so, there seems to be not enough respect for, was there a period of time you were the unquestioned best? Patrick Willis is still waiting. To me, he was the best middle linebacker for 5 years. He should be in.
Yeah.
Andre Johnson might never get in. Andre Johnson was a badass at the receiver spot.
Right.
So what, so it's a tough position. What do you think about Tyreek? Do you think Tyreek right now is a Hall of Famer?
So I don't. And I also think, and this is probably unfair, but it's the truth, is that with Heisman votes now, is it Lincoln Riley or is it always the quarterback? I mean, Baker Mayfield was being compared to Drew Brees' accuracy, and in his last 17 starts, he's like 56%. He's not accurate. So I say, with Mahomes and Reed, if Tyreek would have gone to Atlanta, he would have been a very fun player. But when you're playing in these high-profile games with the most creative coach, the greatest quarterback, excellent protection, and Travis Kelce gets doubled, boy, did it help. It helps a lot. So I think I take about 10% off Tyreek on the system has provided a lot of his greatness.
That's fair, which is why maybe if he has 1 or 2 more great years in Miami, it helps him. And I know we're late. Last one.
That's okay.
The 2 Cowboys offensive linemen, I think at least one of them and maybe both of them eventually get in Tyron Smith and Zach Martin. But offensive line's really tough. I agree. Trent Williams and Jason Kelce are no doubters. When you look at the all-pros for Tyron Smith and Zach Martin, all-decade stuff, they might get in, and Lane Johnson with the Eagles might get in. But that is the offensive line is a tough nut to crack when it comes to the Hall of Fame.
Co-host of First Things First, he's my buddy, Nick Wright. As always, loved it, Nick. Let's talk soon, buddy.
Talk to you later, my man.